everyone. I'm Susan Lambert-Haddam, and this is 80s TV Ladies.
And I'm Sharon Johnson. 80s TV Ladies is our podcast where we get to talk about female-driven television shows from the 1980s. Today, we have a very, very special guest from Remington Steele.
Remington Steele starred Stephanie Zimbalist, Pierce Brosnan, and Doris Roberts. It ran from 1982 to 1987 on NBC.
It's a mystery crime show following cases of a female private investigator who starts her own detective agency, ends up having to create a fictitious male boss so people will hire her agency, and then partners with a former thief and con man who assumes the role of said detective, the already famous Remington Steele.
I couldn't be more excited for today's episode, Sharon. We get to talk with the star of Remington Steele, actress Stephanie Zimbalist. She created the role of Laura Holt. She has had a vast career across television and the stage, and as a theater maker myself, that makes me very happy. In addition to being the star of a groundbreaking 5-season hit TV show, Remington Steele, she starred in the movies The Awakening with Charlton Heston, The Magic of Lassie with James Stewart, and the TV and miniseries Centennial, The Gathering, Incident in a Small Town, and Stop the World, I Want to Get Off.
On stage, she's performed in an incredible amount of theater productions across the country, from South Coast Rep to the Long Wharf Theater in Connecticut. She's been in A Little Night Music, The Lion and Winter, Tea at 5, You Can't Take It With You, Hamlet, The Night of the Iguana, The Rainmaker, The Cherry Orchard, The Philadelphia Story, and many more.
Stephanie comes from entertainment royalty. Her father, Efrem Zimbalist Jr., was an actor who also appears in several episodes of Remington Steele. Please welcome Stephanie Zimbalist to 80s TV Ladies. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for being on our show.
Hello, my dear.
Hi.
Hello, Sharon. Hello, Susan.
We are so excited to have you. I'm completely nerding out because I obviously was a huge fan of Remington Steele, which is why we're covering it on the show, as was Sharon. And so Laura Holt was a huge icon to so many women and so many young women because it was one of the first times we saw a character like that on network television.
Right.
I'm just going to start by saying thank you for creating Laura Holt.
I had something to do with it. Actually, I'm sure that my friend Robin would tell you that we tip our hats to Michael Gleason. And before that, we tip it to Robert Butler, who came to Gleason with the idea.
Yes, and we're thrilled about them, and I want to hear about working with them and all that kind of stuff. But let's start off with, like, really how you come from a performing family. You were acting since you were a teen. Was it inevitable that you were going to be an actress?
Well, I go back several generations, actually. My grandfather, Efrem, wonderful, gifted genius of a violinist, was Russian, and he, 4 generations before the family came from Hungary, came from the area of Budapest. So if you go to the Budapest phone book, Zimbalist is sort of like Smith in the phone book. And his father in Rostov-na-Donu was the head of the orchestra. And so Grandpa grew up under the timpani, and he knew all of the great pieces of music by the time he was 7. So I come from that, many generations of that. And then there's lots of my father's mother, who is my grandmother, was a great, great singer named Alma Gluck. She was from Romania. She was actually from Transylvania, to be specific. She was the first person in the history of the world to sell 1 million records.
Wow.
She sang with Caruso. She sang with McCormick. She sang with Nellie Melba. She sang. If you Google Alma Gluck, it's just, you have just an orchestra of links. It's just, it goes on and on and on. She was a great singer. She was a singer's singer. Her daughter, who is my half-aunt, Marcia Davenport, was a fabulous writer, really great, great writer, historical fiction and fiction. And before that, she was the music editor of the Herald Tribune and close friends of all kinds of amazing people. She was a wonderful lady. And on my mother's side, there's a lot of diplomats, lots and lots of diplomats. I think my great-great-grandfather he dealt with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He had big mutton chops. He was Czech. I believe he was Czech. He was Prochnik was his name. So that's where I come from. I started writing and directing and producing when I was about 7.
Wow.
And my stage was the hallway of my house, my parents' house, not far from where I live now. I don't have to say where it is, but pretty close to where I am. So I never wanted to be in front of on stage or in front of the camera. I wanted to be in control. So that's where it started. And then I went, my mother booted me off to summer camp in Lake Champlain, Mallett's Bay, Vermont. It's called Brown Ledge Camp. And that's where I got the itch and the bug to be an actor. And so I started on the stage there when I was about 12. And by the time I was halfway through my stint at boarding school, I'd already been accepted to Julliard, and then off I went. So that's basically how it happened for me. Julliard they didn't do that much for me. They had very little to do with me except kicking me out, I believe. They told me to take a year off, and I think I might be in my 52nd year off or something like that. Something like that.
Were you a lot of trouble?
Not at all.
Oh.
I wasn't trouble enough. I was too sheltered, and they didn't like it.
Oh.
But they booted me out. They booted Chris Reeve, who was a year ahead of me, out. I think they booted Robin Williams out too.
Sounds like you're in good company in that regard.
Well, yeah, there were 32 of us that were accepted, and there were 3 of the 32 that graduated after 4 years. There were only 3.
Wow.
And of those 3, I don't believe any of the 3 is still working as a performer anymore.
That's an interesting program. Interesting statistic. Anyway, so I do want to talk about, though, when did you meet Robin Bernheim? And you said you started writing really early together with her.
Well, I started in school. It was Marlborough. It was a really excellent girls' school. I started in 7th grade there, and there was a gal in my class of 82, I think, that decided she wanted to bring her best friend from elementary school and have her join us in 8th grade. And so when I met Robin, we became fast friends, absolute fast friends. And over the course, we stayed at that school a couple of years. Then we went to another private school that was co-ed. Robin wanted to leave. She didn't think it was healthy to have just a, single sex school. And I didn't want my best friend leaving me there. So I switched. And then I went off to boarding school in Virginia. But the times that we were together in school, we wrote, and we pretend that we had a radio show, and then we wrote, I can't tell you how many, we wrote these outgoing messages for our tape machines, those funny phone mate, big old machines that you had to accept your calls when they first came out. They were these giant things, and you had to push buttons. Well, we wrote, I still have all of them. I should transfer them so I have them properly saved, but we must have written about 30. We have about 30 of those that we wrote.
You have your own Rockford Files opening.
Yeah, that's right. And then, when I got on Remington, Robin she told you, I bet, she got her master's in arts administration. And she got that at UCLA, and she lived with me in my little house while she was there. So we were there together. And so in my first break, on my first hiatus of Remington, I said, why don't we write a spec? So we wrote a spec. I took my whole hiatus that first year, and we just buckled down and we wrote a spec script. You know it. It's, you don't get the assignment. You don't have money in your pocket. Nobody says it's ever going to be produced, but it's a spec script to put under the nose, if you can get it, under the nose of an interested director, producer, writer. And so we handed it to Michael, and he said, this is damn good. We're not going to do this one, but this is damn good, and we're going to give you an assignment next year. So the following year is when we wrote our own script, which I'd always been intrigued by. We each had our parts that we did, and it was clear, Robin was a very gifted writer, and I was too. But I always loved that movie, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. So we patterned our script after that. And the MacGuffin, what we were chasing was a chocolate chip cookie recipe that had no calories, which sounds so stupid today, but it was revolutionary then.
It doesn't sound stupid to me. Who wouldn't want a calorie-free chocolate chip cookie? They would be piled up around me. So
exactly. So into Laura's cabriolet, as the story progresses, there's another character that we add on and add on and add on and add on. And of course, by the end, my little cabriolet, which was patterned after my own VW Diesel Rabbit, of course, they patterned everything after me. It was so silly. So, but there must have been like 10 people in the car all chasing down this recipe. I can't remember. I think Jean Smart was in that.
Yes, Jean Smart and a young Gina Davis.
Yes.
Gina Davis was in that episode too. And that fabulous actress, oh God. She was a really great actress, stage actress. I'm blanking. You probably have the list right there.
I know. We're looking at the list. Mrs. is going to look it up right now. So
if you say her name, she was fabulous. We had really, really good actors in that one. But it was delightful. It was fun. It was silly. And it was also very much what Glenn Gordon, oh God, he was a producer on our show.
Cameron.
He took sort of that silliness and brought it to Sybil and Bruce's show, Moonlighting.
Yes.
But he liked that kind of thing. He said, that's the kind of show I like. I said, I do too. because, we couldn't ever throw ourselves totally into comedy. And I used to say I didn't say it often because we were working too hard to even be bothered for me, but we never really got Emmy nominations. I think Doris got an Emmy nomination for the show, but Pierce and I didn't. And it's because, were we serious? Were we funny? What was it? Was it tongue in cheek? And I think oftentimes we weren't silly enough to sort of fall into comedy. And we weren't serious enough so those episodes, when Laura's crying over the destruction of something, her apartment or her house or whatever, or something terrible happens, or some emotional thing happens between them, you go, oh, that's too bad. That's fine. But it never was dealt with as a true drama. So we called ourselves a dramedy. And there wasn't a category in the enemas. I call them the enemas now. There wasn't a category in the enemas for dramedy, so we kind of fell through the cracks.
Which is, such a shame, because the ability of you and Pierce and Doris and the rest of the cast and all the other guest stars to do both comedy and drama is remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah. We had, I don't know if one of the magic things about Remington, which I don't know if Robin covered, but one of the magic things we had was the casting of the guest stars. And that was all in the capable, gifted hands of Molly LaPata. Molly LaPata gave us the most extraordinary cache of actors. Pierce and I would start to, rehearse a scene, and I'd find myself, in a chair sitting next to one of these wonders, and I'd say, God, you're good. Oh, thank you. You're from New York? Oh, yeah. And how long have you been out here? 3 weeks. Every single actor that was good on the show was from New York stage and had been out here for 3 weeks. And so I said to myself, there's a pattern here. And I had kind of let go of my theater roots to do Remington. And that's where I went launching out after I finished Remington, because, I was never interested in celebrity. I wasn't interested in being famous. I wasn't interested in making a pile of money. I was interested in being the very best that I could be. And that's why I headed to the theater after Remington, was because of these fabulous actors that we had on the show.
That is amazing, because I wanted to talk about your theater work. I'm a huge theater fan. I write plays. I produce theater.
Right.
And so you have played so many stages, done so many classics, and worked with so many incredible people. And you've played Katharine Hepburn.
Yep.
So I'm curious what your favorite theater productions that you've done. You know, Susan, a little bit about the leaps that you take.
the theater is about the boldness of choices that you make, and film is your ability to react, because it's a reactive medium. It picks up. I'll just pick a performance. She's always staggering, but the woman that was in Don't Look Up.
Oh,
the young
yes.
Jennifer Lawrence.
She is unbelievable. She's extremely gifted, because we want to know what she's thinking and what she's feeling. It's not a theatrical gift, and it's not a theatrical performance, but it is definitely a film performance, So that's basically the difference. And if you're lucky enough, if you can bring both of those gifts to play, that's what I started to do when I started on stage, is that I could bring my reactive sensibilities, my chops from doing a lot of film at that point, to the theater, and people appreciated it. Tommy Toon, when we were on the road for so long with My One and Only, he'd say, well, I don't know if you're the best dancer I ever saw, and you can sing a little bit, but my God, you're the best Edith that we ever had. So that was because of the nature of my gift on the screen. And then once you've got some stage chops, then when you come to film, you can be a little bolder about the choices that you make on film, because it's not going to kill you to make a big choice. Go ahead and do it. I once was doing a production of, I was playing Varia. It was the second time I'd done Cherry Orchard. The first time was a notable production at the Long Wharf in between, I forget which, it was between Remington, seasons. And at that point, I was playing Anya, which is the young girl. I didn't know what I was doing. But we had some wonderful actors in that one. But I always knew I wanted to play Varia. I knew it. And my friend Fran Brill, she was the voice. She was the first. She was Prairie Dawn on the Muppets.
Oh,
yeah, she was Prairie Dawn. She had that funny little voice, that kind of gurgly voice. Anyway, she was a wonderful Varia. She was really great. So when I did get to play Varia on my second production here, where I live in Los Angeles, I found the reason I took the production, because it was a whopping $7 a performance I got. The reason I decided I had to do it, and I auditioned and I got the part, was because Alfred Molina was playing Lepakin.
Oh my God.
So I played in that production for 5 months, and I'm sitting there with a friend of mine I asked to come see the show before we opened. Fabulous actor named Daniel Davis. You probably remember, he was a great stage actor, but he was the butler in The Nanny.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He's a great actor. I mean, he's a great stage
Fantastic.
actor. He's just, Danny's one of the handful of greatest actors ever. So he came to a preview before we opened, and he wasn't saying much. And I said, Danny, I have this idea of what I want Varia to do, what I want to do at the end of the play. When Lepakin walks in and he looks at her, the cherry orchard has been sold. It's going to be gone. The trees are going to be chopped down. There's going to be no more cherry orchard. It's gone. And he looks at me and he walks out. Well, the way it's written, of course, is that Varia falls apart. And that's the last time you see her once more, but that's her big moment, right? So I played it the way it was supposed to be written. You just fall apart after that. And I said to Danny, I said, I just feel so inclined that I have to burst out laughing the minute he leaves. I have to burst out laughing. And at the top of the laugh, I have to just peel in tears and just turn into a heap. And he said, Stephanie, you're getting $7 a performance. What the hell do you think you're doing this for, if not to be bold and to do what you want to do? Do what you want to do. And so I did what I wanted to do, and that's all that anybody ever talked about when they saw that perform. The whole production was that moment that I had where I did that.
It's one of the most powerful things about theater, I think.
Yeah.
I love that story because you get to do what you want to do. It may not work.
That's right.
But it's one of my favorite things about writing for theater is I just write what I want to write.
Of course.
And that's very freeing when you have to write on assignment. Even then, because you've already sort of gotten to release a lot of the other stuff that you have to say. And so
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And is that moment, is that reflective of one of the things you like about theater? I mean, especially that maybe that helps keep it fresh for you over a long run, the ability to find something or find a moment and not necessarily experiment, but to possibly take it in a slightly different direction or sort of play with it a little bit as you're going along?
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because there's two kinds of stage actors. There are the ones that they just repeat their performance, and they just show up at the theater, and they're either doing a national or their Broadway run, and they get their money and they do it, and they get bored. They get bored pretty fast. And then there's the other kind, of which I am. I'm the latter, where I'm constantly, I'm fine tuning, I'm changing it. I had the pleasure, by the way, of I was doing a big old scene with Jessica Tandy. We were doing a movie for NBC called The Story Lady. And Jess and I'd worked with her daughter. I'd worked with Tandy in the theater, Tandy Cronin, who I love. She's just divine and a wonderful stage actress herself. And so Jess knew me through Tandy, and we had to wait and wait. They were setting up a crane shot. And so I had this lovely time with Jessica. And we were talking about, I don't want to rat on another actor, but we were talking about a big performance that was playing in New York at the time. And it was a performance that had gone astray. It was, I think the gal won the Tony, by the way, but she started at A, and it became a vaudeville act. It was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. I don't know where the performance started, but when my friends and I sat there in the third row center, we just thought we were watching a bomb go off. It was so terrible. So Jessica and I to make conversation, I said, "Did you see blah, blah, blah in blah, blah, blah?" And she said, "Oh, yes, I did." And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "Well, you see, I always feel that when you're in rehearsal, what you have to do is you're laying a groundwork. You're laying your area that you're going. You're putting up the scaffolding on the character that you're playing. It's very important. And you work with the director doing that. And it's key. And when you go off on your own and you're playing in the production, you don't leave that scaffolding. You never leave it. You must be married to that." And our friend, and she mentioned her name, our friend did not pay attention to that. She was wooed by the audience and the audience's response. And therefore, there was no production. There was no performance anymore. So I always remembered what she said. It's one of those little nuggets that goes down. You never forget it,
That is amazing. And by the way, you're an amazing voice actress.
Yes.
At some point I'll do my Katharine Hepburn, but I'll tell you how that came about. It's pretty funny. I mean, it's hilarious how it came about, but
well, tell us.
I do. I have a lot of voices. I do my neighbor. I have a Russian neighbor. I do her really well. I don't think she's heard me do it. But basically, who came to me? I was come to, as we used to say. I was approached to do Tea at 5. It's Matthew Lombardo wrote this one-woman piece that used to be a 2-act. The first act of Tea at 5, it's 1939, I believe. I'll tell you when it was. It's right before the big hurricane, where on the Sound, on Long Island Sound, right where her house is. And of course, I'm blanking on her fabulous house, but that's where the first act takes place. It happens during the hurricane. He married the idea that she's getting the rejection, that she will never play Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. She failed just as the hurricane hits. And that's the first act. Then the actress has 15 minutes to change from playing 39 to 76. And now it's the end of her life, and she's reflecting on her life. Well, it's quite a turn for an actor for many reasons. first of all, in the beginning, you get to play that wonderful, that lovely light thing, all that she did, and all those lovely movies that she did, and you do all that lovely stuff. But then you get to go into the second part of her life where she actually has the wobble, and she talks like this. But also along with that, I got really good at the makeup. So when I turned from the fireplace, the audience would go, it's quite delicious. It's great fun. So it was great fun. Well, this is one of the things I wanted to tell you. So I had a lovely gal who was starting up my website at the time, and she was an IT freak. She could find out anything. So in the story, in the play that Matthew Lombardo had written, there were, I think I'm counting, this is off the top of my head, there were like 4 suicides in Katharine Hepburn's family before Katharine Hepburn's line, before Katharine Hepburn hits the line. And so I wrote to my friend who was managing, my website, and I said, I'm just curious, were there any suicides in her family since then? So she sends me this huge link, this huge email with all these salacious links. And they're all about, this person, was shot and murdered, and this person was having an affair, and this person, it's just on and on, these awful things. And this person, fell off some bridge, but it goes on, and it's worse and worse. And I'm going, Jiminy crackers. And one of the links, one of the stories, it's like 1649. We have Edgar Spalding of Massachusetts. And he had 10 children. Now, my family is Spalding on my mother's side without the U. This Spalding was with the U. And I go, At that time, my mother's brother, her oldest brother, was Francis Lecomte Spalding Jr. And he had written the Spalding family tree, which is about 400 pages. So I wrote to my very serious, educated uncle who was alive then, who had no sense of humor and no sense of the extraordinary. And I said, Jick, I'm curious. Let me send you this link. And I didn't say why. I just said, can you tell me, do we have any connection between this Edgar Spalding of Chelmsford, Massachusetts? So he sends me this very dry thing. And I'm reading it. And basically, he's putting down all the salacious links that she had sent me about other Spaldings and other people. But this particular one, he says, okay, we're of the line of Joseph Spalding, because he had 10 children. So we're of the line of Joseph, and Katharine Hepburn is of the line of Benjamin. So I count backwards and count down, and I realize at that moment that I'm her 9th cousin.
Oh my.
Now, the interesting thing about that is that there are a lot of actors that are related to Katharine Hepburn.
Okay, so we're going to take a little break and come back. We'll be right back. And we're back. Back to it. Let's go.
I had the pleasure, by the way, of I met her, Katharine Hepburn. Linda Pearl and I, there was a play that was written for us called The Baby Dance, and we did take it to New York. It had a wonderful run. And there was only one person in the 11 weeks that original cast played it, that any member of the audience came up the stairs or were invited to come up the stairs to the dressing room, and that was Katharine Hepburn. And she said, "Oh, you were all so good." She said, "I thought I was the only one." Well, I had my Aunt Marcia, who I mentioned to you, was a good friend of Kate's. And I said, "Miss Hepburn, I'm Marcia's niece, Marcia Davenport." "Oh, for heaven's sakes," she said. And I said, "Listen, I have one shot left on my Konica Auto Reflex T, my little camera. Would you please cajole us and let us have one picture?" with you. Oh, couldn't you just remember me in your memory? And I said, please. Oh, all right. So I have this picture of the cast and me. She's right in the center. She's got a purse with these gold rings on the strap. And it looks as if, on quick glance, that she's holding her Academy Award. And it's the most glorious picture. And because my camera was a little busted, there's a beam of light that comes down from the top of the picture right to her, right over her head. And so for Christmas that year, after our show had closed, I made beautiful 8x10s for each of my cast members, and I framed them and I sent them to them for their Christmas present. And they all, of course, still have that picture. Now, I come from a family, my dad was not a fan of Katharine Hepburn, mostly probably because of her politics, but that's not all. So I was not a fan of Katharine Hepburn either. I was a fan of Audrey. I knew Audrey. I met Audrey. I was on the set of Wait Until Dark. I remember the moment when she came up to me and took my face in her hands. It was like a deer. It was like a doe. And I couldn't believe this woman. She was just poetry in motion. So my connection with Katharine Hepburn was, I'll pull it off. I'll do it. I can do this. I'll be fine. The writer, Matthew Lombardo, said, you have to arrive off book for the first rehearsal. I said, what? A one-woman show off book. Oh, God. So up until that moment when I started to rehearse this play, it sounds really dumb, but I had never seen a Katharine Hepburn movie. I'd never seen one. So we start to rehearse with the writer-director. I'm rehearsing in New York, and I'm off book right away. And he's kind of stunned. Then we get Joey Tillinger, who was going to be directing us, but he decided to go to Europe. He came in for one day to see how I was doing, because I'd done other things. I did Sylvia with him and stuff. I'd done other things. And so Joey says to Matthew, well, I think we picked the right person, don't you? I mean, she's just great. I don't have to be here. So he went off, and I didn't have a director. I had no director. No director, just a person to say, you want to be on this mark, on this word, because our lighting cues, you gotta fall into the blocking for the lighting cues. Oh, okay. So when you hit this word in the text, you have to be right there. Okay. So basically it was the two of them, the stage manager and the writer, putting me on my marks. So I'm doing this thing, directing myself. Nobody's directing me. He's just correcting me when I blow a word. That's all. So we get to the Ordway, I guess it's called, in St. Paul. It's the Ordway. And we are a huge hit. I mean, we're a ridiculously huge hit. But before I got on the plane, I said to my niece, Christy, I think I better watch a Hepburn movie. I'm just winging it with this accent. I don't know. I better go listen. So I went down to her apartment in Chelsea, and somebody got about 5 films, little DVDs. And I spent one afternoon watching. I got it. And then I watched, and I know all of her work, and I know, which ones I like the best and why. I got her old voice radio. I got it. So by the time we opened at the Ordway, I had it. I had the voice. It was done. In fact, I hate to say, I'm bragging on myself, but the main reviewer in Minneapolis, he said, I have to have a personal interview with you. I gave you a rave in the paper, but I have to have an interview with you. So we went off to lunch at some point. He said, how did you do this? I said, I don't know. I don't know how I did it. I just did it. But it was great fun. And after that, then it was, we revamped it about 5 years later, 4. I've done it in a lot of places. We've done it all over California. I've done it in the Cape. I've done it in Ogunquit. I've done it in a lot of places, this play. But it was great fun. And that's it's really fun to have an audience in the palm of your hand for 2 hours just by yourself.
That is insane. And you said it used to be a 2-act?
Kate Mulgrew originated the role. I never saw her do it, but she pulled it off. She did it and had a slammingly awful thing to say about me just because I was going to do it. She never saw me do it, but she said, oh, she's just a television actress. What does she know? Ooh. So, yeah, it was really bad. Yeah. But at any rate, I never got to say, but I never got to say that. But I think she's a smashing actress. I think she's really a good actress. But at any rate, recently, I think it was at the beginning of COVID, they hired Faye Dunaway, and they were in Boston. They were in tryouts in Boston. It's a hard knuckle for most actors to take. So they put Faye Dunaway into it, and it was a car crash. And it was a disaster. Mm-hmm. And she said some terrible things. They said some terrible things, and she quit. But she quit in the middle of a production. In the middle of a performance, she quit.
Wow. And
so I emailed Matthau and I said, Matthau, I'm here in Connecticut. If you need me, let me know. And so they never did. So I never got to do it again. But that they had made it into this one act thing where basically, as I have heard, it's basically Kate just reminiscing about Spencer. It doesn't have all those delicious bumps that you take in the first act and all that other stuff.
I was saying earlier to Robin that I got to see Holland Taylor do Anne at the Pasadena Playhouse.
Yep.
And that's a one-woman show and quite beautifully written.
Yeah.
And it was spectacular to see her reprise that role. We got to see her on Broadway do it.
She's been attached to that for a very long time. It started with my friend Lou Antonio directing her in it here, which I heard ended up being a bit of a car crash. So, what's her name?
Holland Taylor.
Holland was a really good friend of my sister's. My sister was gay, and Holland's gay. I'm sure everybody knows that by now. But she's been to our house in Connecticut many times, and I know her pretty well, and she's a wonderful actress. So it's a performance that I would have liked to have seen.
It's quite spectacular. Yeah. But I'm always startled when people do a one-person show and are able to carry that through. I mean, just the weight of that, carrying the drama all together on yourself is really quite spectacular.
Did you see, Susan, that this actor named Sean Hayes has some one-man show that he's doing in New York?
I did see that, but what's it called? I
can't remember, but I read the reviews. I get this thing, which if you don't get it, you've got to get it. It's called Grace Notes. Have you ever heard of Grace Notes?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I'll get it.
Grace Notes is free.
Okay.
And maybe it's not free anymore. I think Susan has booted it up, so it's like $45 a year. It's an online daily theatrical bulletin, and it covers the United States, and it also covers London. And you don't miss anything. It'll give you like the 3 top reviews on something, and you can click and read the whole thing if you want to, but you don't have to. So it kind of keeps me up on everything.
It's a great highlight.
Oh, it's great.
Sounds like a great highlight. Right?
Grace Notes. It's called Grace Notes. Yeah.
Grace Notes. All right. I love it.
Her name is Susan Grace. Yeah.
All right. Well, we could keep diving, but I think we have to save some theater stuff for the theater podcast. And so we're going to swing back to Remington Steele and Laura Holt.
Okay.
And, I do, like, Michael Gleason and Robert Blecker give you a lot of credit on the DVD commentary about the character of Laura Holt and the fedora being you, and sort of you really getting that 30s vibe.
Yeah, I would go shopping. I'd go to the swap meet here, the Rose Bowl swap meet, and buy my suits. And I'd go to some like hilltop pile of old suits, and I'd buy these suits for $5, and then we'd have them fitted to me for about $400. And I still have them. In fact, I'm getting back to where I might one day be able to wear them, but I was a size 2 or a 4 then. I'm getting back to where I was, but it was a pretty disastrous menopause that I had.
It's a interesting turn that lady.
But I did the suits. I did the hats because I always knew I looked good in hats. I looked great in hats. So I brought the hats in, and I was constantly battling, of course, the DP, because he always wanted me to raise the lip of the front of the fedora. I'd say, no, it looks stupid if I'm wearing it that way. And so they turn and but Yeah, I remember that.
Well,
and Dennis Matsuda?
Dennis Matsuda was not, Dennis Matsuda was the operator.
Okay.
Kenny was our DP.
All right, I'll look it up in just a second.
Kenny
Peach.
Dennis was terrific. Kenny Peach, yeah.
That is fantastic. I mean, it was so funny because Robert Butler also went on to say that for the pilot, the reshot pilot, he got excited about the fedoras and put them on everybody, and then he had to reshoot some scenes with the bad guys and pull them off because it was looking ridiculous.
It does give you a sense of the 30s, though. It does.
It does, and there's such a love. It's just a love letter, that those first early episodes, to the look of it and the snap of it was very much in that style of The Thin Man and the 30s and Cary Grant, and you really captured that. You guys captured that with the show early on. But I also thought it was interesting. There was another comment that stuck with me about you saying that you understood, and basically something like this. You said this show is 3 feet off the ground, so the only way to play it is with your feet firmly on the ground.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's true. But you had to have a little bit of tongue in cheek. You had to have that little sense that you were playing it just off the ground. That's correct. Pierce used to say that too. Yeah.
And you're struck by how confident the character of Laura Holt is, and I'm also struck now. I was a teenager and I was watching you, and it felt like you were way more adult than I was, and I wasn't that far behind you. But your ability to play confidence in 1980 television was unprecedented.
Thank you.
How'd you do that?
Well, it was, my pop was, Daddy didn't coach me or anything like that, but being on a set with my pop, you go, oh my God. And Pierce felt the same way. This is the master, this fellow. I couldn't believe how much he knew. I thought I knew a lot, but he just, oh my gosh. He just knew a great deal. He knew the medium. He knew how to do it. He knew grace. He knew culture. He knew all that stuff. And he knew what was most important, which is how you treat your fellow members of the set. And it was terribly important how you acted. And that's what the guest people would say to both Pierce and me. It's just amazing. You treat us so well. And a lot of people that went on to have their own series said, you really set the example for us, And I remember there was Daddy had a first, Paul's blanking, but Paul. And he used to say, Stephanie, when your dad would come on the set, I think it was on FBI, it would take forever because he had to go. It was a Monday and he'd have to ask everybody how their weekend was. And did your wife have that surgery? And did she get my note? And I hope this is all right. And did you ever get your car fixed? And if you need a little extra cash, just that's the kind of guy he was,
We were just talking about that on a set. Scott Bakula is apparently like that on set. We were talking about Quantum Leap with Robin. And so, it makes a huge difference to the tone of a set. And so in terms of building the character of Laura Holt around these beautiful words that Michael Gleason wrote and the sort of setting that Robert Butler did you know you were creating a feminist icon? Which you were. We've already said it 10 times, so.
Well, I fought hard for the original, again, when we talk about what Jess said, I fought hard for the structure because our scaffolding was that there was a woman behind the man. Mm-hmm. And that's what made it different. The man was a front man and the woman was the one that was calling the shots and was the smart one. And they started to change that. There was a place where I really had to put down my foot. And I don't have to go into the weeds on that. I'd rather not. It was, it's like I had a friend over for dinner last night and he complimented me on my dinner. And then he said, It's much better than the meal that you made. Do you remember the meatloaf? And then he went on about the meatloaf for about 10 minutes. It's like, why are you talking about the meatloaf? Why don't we talk about the meal I just made that was really good? Let's talk about that. So, now I lost my train of thought.
Creating the character and keeping
the character and
keeping it real.
Yeah,
keeping
so
it
there was a
the
part
scaffolding.
where it was really looking kind of wobbly. And I said, let's go back to what I signed on for. And this is what I signed on for. And that, by the way, guys, is why I have top billing. Don't forget that my name is first. And there's a reason that it's first. It's not second, it's first. I am not Girl Friday in this. Let's stick to what we made. And so I put my foot down and I came close. I mean, I was prepared to leave the show and I didn't. So to answer your question, yes, I was aware of what had been presented to me, what was unique about what had been presented to me, why they picked me. By the way, they came to me 3 times. Jerry Windsor was the head of casting. And I kept turning it down. I said, no. And I turned it down because I thought I had a big career as a feature actress and I was going to be serious. I'm a serious actor and I've done this and that and I'm going to do this and that. And this little light fluff. But somebody finally convinced me, but you're not quite old enough at that time to be a big feature actress. And you're actually too old to be that sort of young ingenue that you used to play. So this will cover the gap. So basically, that's why I took Remington, to just cover the gap. That's why I did it. Okay. All right, I'll do it.
Well, we're very glad you did and very glad you kept their eyes on the prize, if you will, of understanding what it is that made the show unique and interesting for the audience, because there wasn't anything else like this on television and really hasn't been since. With this strong, independent woman who knows who she is and knows what she wants and isn't afraid to say so.
Thank you. Well, it's, it helps if you have, and, Michael and I, he was one of my best friends, of course. He was just the best. But, Michael, because we had gone through writing sessions and we had gone through all that. So he knew that I knew what I was talking about. And the reason I never pursued any more writing, at least on Remington, was because I didn't have time. Mm-hmm. I did not have time. And then when I started to get rolling, I do really interesting pieces in my hiatuses. So I didn't have time. But what he did allow me is I would read the script. And if I didn't understand anything, I'd write. I had a red marker and I'd say, what's this? What about this? You have this idea here 20 pages ago and nothing ever happens to that. What happened to that? And Laura was this and she followed this and what happens to her then? And I had a couple of pieces that he wrote, and I said, you know what? I don't understand anything of what you're trying to say in this. I don't get it. I'm so sorry. One time he got mad at me. He said, I don't care. You just do the work. You just you just do the work. So he loved a complicated script, but the problem was sometimes it was too complicated. And my sweet pop said, I can never follow a Remington script. I never know what's going on. I don't understand it. I said, I know, Daddy. I know. He said, really, I just don't understand it. I said, I got it.
Well, we know that eventually you and Robin did write a script together, which I have to tell you is one of my all-time favorite episodes of the show.
Thank you.
It was so much fun. It made me laugh so hard. It had everything that I loved about the show in it in one place. And I honestly, until we started working on this podcast, I didn't know that you had co-written an episode, right. Probably because I wasn't paying attention to those kinds of things when the show was on. I just knew I loved the show. I watched it and all those names came up and I didn't pay a lot of attention to them. Unlike Susan, who would watch it and was paying more attention to that sort of thing.
I was like, wait, there's a woman on the credits. What? Can someone do that?
Yeah.
But it actually made me think about something you were saying earlier about how you and Robin worked together and wrote together and on some things together when you were kids. But obviously at some point you decided that the acting point, or maybe it was always the acting that was always more important to you, the direction you thought you were going to go.
Yeah. Well, there's the other thing, Sharon, and that is that there's time that is not on your side when you are a leading lady. If you're a character person, it's a whole different thing. But there are very few Jean Smarts out there. There just are very few of them. And, when Meryl thought that her career was waning at some point, she squawked. She squawked all over the New York Times, and she squawked and said, "What's happening? Why are men getting this and I'm not?" And she squawked loud enough so that they listened. Now she's, she can take whatever she wants. She can do whatever she wants. But all those wonderful years didn't go away that she had in front of a camera. She got to use all those wonderful years. We got to see her all the way through. And that's the bitch about being a film actress. You can't sort of take your time off. As you've noticed, that lovely gal we just mentioned that's in Don't Look Up, she was supposed to, Sharon, isn't it Sharon? Is that her name? No.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Lawrence. Not Sharon. There's a big difference. Actress. I like Sharon Lawrence, but she ain't Jennifer Lawrence. No. Yes. But she was supposed to retire. She said, "I'm retiring." And then all of a sudden she's not retiring. She's not retiring. You can't retire.
It was like Robin said, women have to do everything men do, but backwards and in high heels.
Right. Backwards and in high heels.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And speaking of high heels, you do a lot of running in high heels in Remington Steele.
I'm looking at my bunions to prove it now.
I think it's in that episode that you wrote, Steele and the Chips, where Gina Davis is like, "How do you do that?" And you're like, "Practice."
Yeah.
But I love that you nod it, that there's a nod to that you are. Laura Holt was running around in high heels. And I want to give you a nod also. You're very athletic.
Right. Amazing.
I am not only athletic, but they made me an honorary member of the Stunt Women's Association.
Wow.
Had my white jacket for a long time. Debbie Evans was my stunt gal, and we're still very much in touch. In fact, we've got to have lunch pretty soon. She could drive a motorcycle up a tree and stop it. She's unbelievable what she can do. She's still working. She's terrific. And
all right, you'll have to help us get her on the show. We got to get her on the show.
Oh, she's great. That would be a piece of cake. She's a very interesting person. She's got a whole lifetime to tell you all about. Debbie Evans is her name. And they had me do my own stunts. They didn't worry about insurance and stuff. We didn't worry about that kind of stuff because they knew I could do almost everything. And if there was a certain amount of danger, then they pulled me. And then they had Debbie and whoever. Pierce had a few of them. He had more than one. Miles, I think, was one of his guys. But I did a lot of stunts. And the thing is that the first shot is usually a master, and it's usually at 8 a.m. So you're usually doing the stunts in the high heels at 8 a.m.
That's a nice way to start your day, I guess.
And it is stunning. I don't think that they do that with actors anymore.
No.
You guys are throwing yourself out of cars. And it's you.
Yeah.
Like it's you. I couldn't believe it. I was like, that's impossible. I'm like backing it up. What did
I remember? There were two things with terror that I remember because we did a lot. I haven't mentioned this to Pierce in a long time, but when we were shooting in France, there were these things called wet bikes. And the shot was behind us. It was the master was, we run into the scene and there's two wet bikes. So we jump on the backs of we each have a wet bike, and a wet bike is a motorcycle. It's got one ski. And when you give it the gas, it rides up like a horse rearing. It rides way up. And then as you give it more gas, it planes, and it planes on the ocean. I had, I water skied in Acapulco. I learned how to ski finally one ski in Acapulco, but we were shooting Remington. We had an amazing guy, Carlos Mendoza, whose brother, Alfredo Mendoza, was the number one water skier in the world at that point. So Carlos taught me how to ski on one ski, to do a deep start. He taught me, and from that moment, I've been able to do it. So I was familiar with skiing and all that stuff, and I used to ski a lot and snow ski. Anyway, we'd go to do the shot, and I'm skiing, and I look back, and Pierce is still in the water. He's still near the shore. So I circle back and I say, no, we got to do it again. Pierce couldn't figure it out. So they work with Pierce a little bit, showing him how to do it. And again, they set up the shot. I go planing off, and again, I look back. Nope, there's no Pierce. I think eventually I had to do it with the stunt double. I don't think that he got that shot. I don't think he did that shot.
But it's astonishing. I mean, I don't know that there were any other shows that were at that time that had their lead actors doing as many stunts as you guys did.
Yeah.
It just was such an anomaly. I mean, it was amazing.
Well, I'm sure it helped Pierce, when he was doing Bond, of course.
It feels like a couple of those episodes are like an audition tape. You're like, hold on now.
Speaking to him and of him, he is so grateful for everything that was given him. It is such a delight to hear from him, because you can hear thanksgiving in his voice all the time. And it is, we've done our things where I've said, you did this. He said, oh, I'm sorry. We've done all that, we've done all that. And we're friends. It's, his career is booming, and it's relevant is the word. It's a relevant career. Mine is not relevant, but that's okay. It doesn't mean that I didn't have it. It just means that I don't have Spielberg, who was darling to me at one point in my life. He's not knocking on my door. I would knock on his, because I think that West Side Story is the best film of the whole season.
It was so good. God. It was so good.
Oh
yeah.
Oh my God. Fabulous.
And I have to guiltily admit that I haven't seen it yet, but I did see Tick, Tick, Boom, and I did see In the Heights. And so I'm excited. It's on the list.
Tick, Tick, Boom was fantastic. It was very good. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't gossip about it, but anybody that can make a character like that, who is so myopic and so self-obsessed, we care about that person. That actor did a fabulous job.
He's fabulous. He's really fabulous. And I thought it was really well directed. Like I actually really was like,
superb.
This is really smartly done. Yeah, I think you're right, because they make a character that isn't likable.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about.
I know.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have to stop here. We've run out of time. We're going to have to save the part 2 for our next episode, Sharon.
Well, them's the breaks, I guess.
We keep doing this to them. We're sorry. And we're also happy.
But trust us, you definitely want to come back for part 2.
Let's find out what Stephanie has to say about Pierce Brosnan in part 2. And all sorts of questions that haven't been asked yet. Stay tuned for next episode, where we finish our conversation with Stephanie Zimbalist. We want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate. I hope you are able to share a meal with people you love and give thanks for the year we've gone through and the gifts we have been given.
We want to acknowledge that for many Americans, particularly for many Indigenous Americans, Thanksgiving is a national day of mourning.
We record our 80s TV Ladies podcast from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. We pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives past, present, and emerging.
If you want to know more about Native land acknowledgement, LAist has a nice article about land acknowledgement, especially from Los Angeles. Go to our website for the link.
You can also find out whose land you live on by going to Native Land Digital at native-land.ca. Native Land Digital strives to create and foster conversations about the history of colonialism and indigenous ways of knowing. And now for our audiography. The website I want to point you to is stephaniezimbalist.net, the official website for Stephanie Zimbalist.
You also may want to check out the podcast Steele Watching. It's hosted by mother-daughter duo Lois and Carrie Carlock. They do an episode walkthrough of the first season of Remington Steele, and it's pretty adorable. We'd like to take a moment to acknowledge some of the comments we've gotten from some of our listeners. Please keep your comments and questions and all of your thoughts about our podcast coming. We love hearing from you. First off, MJ wrote, Remington Steele is indeed a feminist show. Remember, Laura Holt is the real Remington Steele. Pierce is just filling in. Also, this show mocks the traditional man in charge who is surprised that a woman oh my, while clutching my pearls and gasping, can actually contribute by showing this in a reverse situation. It's like Inception. People watched and didn't even realize they were being educated.
And on email from Sandra G., we got this comment. Just happened to stumble across your podcast this morning and was immediately taken back to my college and med school days in Ann Arbor, where television was a rare treat amidst hours of studying. You hit all the right notes immediately out of the box. The first two shows were weeknight favorites, with Remington Steele holding a very special place in my heart. I well recall writing several fan letters to Stephanie Zimbalist, who was a wonderful role model. I have been a practicing OBGYN for 32 years now and still look back on Laura Holt as one of my greatest inspirations. Keep up the great work. Really enjoyed your insights. Thank you, Dr. Sandra.
What a great comment. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. And last but not least, we had a review from 1986 Hoosier via Apple Podcast. They said, love this. I'm an 80s TV fan, and this is a great look behind the scenes. 5 stars. Thank you, 1986 Hoosier. We're so glad you're enjoying listening.
I'm thinking they're a basketball fan, but I don't know.
Wouldn't surprise me in the least. Please keep the comments coming. And we're always interested in finding out from you, what's the 80s ladies-driven TV show that you remember or have heard of and want us to cover? What are your favorite 2020s TV ladies? You can contact us through the website and through social media.
The website is 80stvladies.com. That's 80stvladies.com. And of course, our social medias are at 80s TV Ladies.
Let us know you're listening. And if you're liking this podcast, please rate and review us. It helps out a lot. We hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will lead us forward toward being amazing TV ladies of the 21st century.
I want to be a TV lady for every century.
Every century to come sounds perfect.
Let's go.